This is Gabriel Custodiet of Watchman Privacy. I know why you're here. You're looking to escape the technocratic apparatuses that you see slowly enveloping you and restraining your freedom. For the fundamentals of privacy, you should start by visiting escapethetechnocracy.com to see my video tutorials, books, and other resources for getting off the surveillance grid. Watchman Privacy and Escape the Technocracy are leading the fight for privacy, and unlike just about any other show, we practice what we preach. Private payment options, no threat modeling, no statist or collectivist solutions, and no sponsors, ever. You know what that means? It means we can speak the unmitigated truth as we see it. Your support alone determines the future of this show. Go support you and me at escapethetechnocracy.com. I'm very pleased to be joined by Jayant Bhandari. This is our sixth conversation together. Jayant Bhandari is a financial analyst. He's a cultural commentator. He's traveled to around 100 countries, lived in many, explored their dark underbellies, and has some insightful thoughts on the state of the world, particularly the third world. Jayant, Mr. Bhandari, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Gabriel, and thanks very much for having me again.
It's my pleasure. I'll just say a little heads up to the listeners. We do delve into some pretty mature topics sometimes, so probably not for kids, and that goes for our previous conversations as well. I do like to get into some of the dark topics, so if you have any kids listening, probably put some headphones on and listen to it yourself. And if you have not listened to our first 5 conversations, you'll still get something out of this one, for sure, but you might also go ahead and either before this one or maybe after, go ahead and track down those first 5. Jayant, I wanted to just go back to kind of a big idea here and just kind of get a fresh start on this topic and ask you this kind of fundamental question that you discuss regularly. Why do they talk about emerging markets and developing economies?
I'm not sure, Gabriel. I suspect the problem is that most of the people ruling us and heading our institutions are idiots. They have no practical experience. And if you look back at the human history of the last 3,000 years, this has often happened that the age of intellectualism starts, in which these naive people who somehow get bribed by idiot rulers or corrupt rulers come into positions of intellectual space, and then they decide what is happening in the world, or they want to convince you about what is happening in the world, which can be completely contrary to the truth. Most of these people either have never visited Congo, or if they have, they fly in first class, get picked up from the airport by a chauffeur-driven, air-conditioned limousine, go to a 5-star hotel, get pampered by rich people there, and return back home to New York or San Francisco. So these people stay clueless about the realities of the street life, let's say in Congo or Zambia or India. And that is the problem we have today. We have very simplistic people doing sort of Excel spreadsheet kind of analysis on what they think the future holds for most of these countries. They don't really have the complex understanding of the cultures of the third world countries. And as a result, they decided a long time back that they were going to call these countries emerging markets. Now, we have known consistently, and if you can go back to the cover sheets of The Economist for the last 50 years, and it always comes up every 2 or 3 or 5 years about how India was going to take over the world, or at least in comparison to China, how India was going to do so much better than China. And consistently, they have been proven wrong, but they decline to return back to their past claims and introspect on what went wrong. There is only one emerging market, and that emerging market is centered on Chinese, whether it's China or bits and pieces of Vietnam or Cambodia. It's all centered on Chinese. But apart from Far Eastern, East Asian people and Western European, there is no society on the planet that is an emerging society or even a civilization. They were never a civilization. They will never be a civilization. These are decadent, hedonistic people, and they will stay that way, which means that they will stay savage and barbarian, even if somehow they were taken out of that savagery by European colonizers or Christian missionaries.
I have some questions later on about how some of these GDP statistics are actually manipulated. Before we get to that, though, some other big picture stuff. IQ. IQ has been an underlying fact of all of our conversations and all of your work. It's a key missing ingredient for anyone who has listened to you and not flipped the lights on, so to speak, not connected the missing dots. Thomas Sowell almost never touches IQ, and it really invalidates some of his otherwise pretty good work. One of the red pills that was difficult for me in the last bit of time is that if you take the map of IQ of particular regions of the world, the differences, by the way, which are vast, and you superimpose that map of IQ onto a map of something like GDP or any other clear evidence of economic or material progress, that these are basically mirror images. It's amazing when you see that, right? So Japan, South Korea, for example, up towards the top, just as one sample. And I'm actually pretty angry that the culture at large has hidden this map from me all these years, right? And people will say, I know this person, and I know this person, and they're still great people. What we're talking about is IQ, not in tiny comparisons, not in tiny communities, not even in cities. We're talking about IQ spread over 100 million people or more and compounded by decades and centuries and millennia. And so you're a fool and you're derelict in your pursuit of truth if you try to dismiss this fact of human life. And it's amazing and infuriating that I spent decades of my life having this crucial map hidden from me because of blatant and self-defeating censorship. And you would think, Jayant, knowing that this map exists, that for any economist, that this would be the first map that they consult before doing their job and making their projections. You would think that sociologists, businesses, humanitarian aid organizations, missionaries, that this would be the first thing that they look at and comprehend before deciding what moves that they're going to make in these countries. And look, you don't even have to look at it in necessarily too black pill of a way, though, if it is a black pill, then you would also want to know that. We know that IQ, for example, can be increased to an extent with better nutrition. I want to start our conversation of IQ by asking you, why do you think IQ is such a forbidden subject, even beyond all of the other forbidden subjects?
Gabriel, I have thought a lot about this issue, and I think without understanding the concept of IQ and how it applies to societies and economic development, you can really understand none of the subjects you mentioned, which is developmental economics, the status of societies, how to improve them, how to run them. All these kind of things cannot be understood unless you understand the concept of IQ. Now, my view is, Gabriel, and I think a lot about it. I don't have a firm a view on this thing, but my view is, Gabriel, that when when America took over from the United Kingdom, America was struggling with its own race issues, and the race issue was the fact that America was the only Western country that had a very significant part of its population made up of people from non-European origin. And America wanted to believe itself and fool itself into believing that the blacks would eventually assimilate. And they wanted to ignore the existence that not only you blacks were not assimilated, they became less and less assimilated as the civil rights movement went on. And that course has continued even today. So today, the black society in the US is very segregated from the mainstream American society, and Americans completely decline to accept that reality. They might pass through a ghetto with their doors of their cars closed, but they will ignore the fact that there is any issue with racial aspect of the American society. What happened, in my view, Gabriel, looking at the history, was that because America wanted to ignore this thing, it wanted to impose the same way of thinking on Europe as well. And it forced European countries to decolonize. It wanted European countries to leave what we now know as the third world countries. Because America wanted to believe that we are all the same and all could run big nations the way Europeans could. Then I think another cascade of problems started as a result of it. And again, Gabriel, this is something I think a lot about. I don't really have a firm conclusion on this. But I think another cascade of problem was that while Islam has its many, many, many problems, and I don't like most of their approaches, the fact is Islam isn't really a problem of America. Only, or at least it wasn't a problem of America until about 2 decades back. What actually happened was that because America was suffering, America wanted to look for problems elsewhere. The real problem was its own social heterogeneity, which they did not want to accept as a heterogeneous society. So they started looking for problems in Islam, and they started going to other countries to solve the problem of America. And I think that is, unless Americans go back to addressing the key issue about the assimilation of blacks in the US, which they will always be distracted, they will be fooling themselves into solving the problems of America by ignoring what is the true problem issue of America, which is to deal with the segregated racial aspect of the American society.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you brought up a good point that the fact that the nation that has been leading the intellectual conversation in recent centuries has it has its own diversity. So that has always been a very taboo subject, and probably others are also nervous. But of course, you can have the conversation about IQ without even going to the North American continent. We know that Japan, for example, these are people with some of the highest IQ, if not the highest in the world. Now, how though, and this is another aspect of this, Jayant, which is that an individual person, whether or not they have a high IQ or a low IQ, they can still accomplish a whole lot in their lives. Nobody denies that. What we're talking about, though, is IQ on the level of a society. So how, in your view, does IQ manifest differently in a society than in an individual?
Gabriel, I have been coming to China for the last 2 decades, and I saw very selfish people spitting on the road, people being mostly uncivil. But over the last 20 years of my visits to China, I have seen a very, very, very significant positive change happening in the society. Now, high IQ people can be vicious. High IQ people can be very uncivilized. But when they are shown good things, they rapidly adopt those and accept those because of their IQ, they understand that civil behavior leads to a better society and better personal life. As a result, high IQ societies, when shown proper behavior, very rapidly adopt those behaviors and improve their lives. That's what we saw happening in Japan, Korea, and China. Same in Singapore and Hong Kong. Now, I always say that these people became better because they copied the North European ways of life. They copied the North European values, even though did not necessarily copy the Western religion, but they copied the fruit and stems and branches of Western society. So, in many ways, Far East Asia looks like Western society because that's what they have copied. And as a result, they have become much better. At the same time, Gabriel, the problem is that when a third world person looks at the Western society, he has a limited spectrum of vision, which means that he cannot see the good values of the Western society. The reason is that you have to have a certain kind of IQ to be able to perceive those values. Otherwise, those values you stay blind to those values. So when third world people look at the first world, what they see is hedonism. What they see is the lower class aspect of the Western world. What they see is the promiscuity, hedonism of Hollywood. And that's what they think is what the West means to them. And that's what they end up copying. Now, if they had sane leaders, suppose the third world countries had sane leaders, which is what they had when Europeans were running those sane leaders structured the institutions the right way in accordance with what the local cultures were like. And that meant that at one point of the time, India was the jewel in the crown. At one point of the time, Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, was the breadbasket of Africa. So Europeans institutionalized things there. They created rational structures in those societies for even the lower IQ people to operate optimally. And that's what happens under high IQ people ruling those societies. Now, what happened is that now these third world countries are run by psychopaths and low IQ street goons who don't really have any understanding. They are stupid, they are demagogues, and they are only after winning the next election. They accumulate money for the sake of accumulating money, Gabriel. And I tell you that unless you have lived and spent time in the third world, you will not understand it. These people could be flooded with cash. There could be tens of millions of dollars of cash sitting in their houses, but they still want more. And they want more and more bribes, and they will go to any extent to collect more cash. That is what the depravities of these people are. So when these low IQ people in ruling positions come in contact with education and money, they become more pervert, not less. And that is actually the irony of the society today, that conventionally, and this is again going back to what I said about the today's intelligentsia, they think that education and prosperity improves the lives of the third world people. Actually, it perverts them completely, because education makes them actually more superstitious. It burdens their mind. Money leads to hedonism rather than using that money to improve themselves spiritually and morally and psychologically, and to use that money for the social improvement. None of those things happen in the third world.
What you just mentioned, Giant, is this interesting connection between IQ and reason, right? There's no doubt a correlation, but what is that correlation is an interesting question, because on the one hand, you have, let's say, processing power, and on the other, you have order and clear, good thinking. So if you think about it like a computer, you could have an incredibly fast processor, but unless the code that you're running on your computer is well optimized for that processor, you're not going to get the most out of it. And in fact, you could still have, a crappy experience on your computer if that code is not optimized. So when Japan is visited by Matthew Perry in the 1850s and they see that they're woefully behind technologically, what they did was they sent their people out into the world to go to Germany and other places in the West to get these ideas, to get Western philosophy, and to try to apply some of that to their high IQs, where they would develop one of the most impressive civilizations in world history, which is Japan today. So interesting to think about the connection between IQ and reason, two different things, but also some kind of correlation. I want to now get us to India pretty early on here. And the first question I want to ask, you're really great on this topic, is the Indian economy, when it's presented by these world organizations, is presented as it's developing, it's strong, it's this and that. How, in your view, does India artificially present its economy as strong? How does it manipulate its GDP? What is going on behind the scenes for some of these numbers to appear as they do?
There's a lot happening, Gabriel, but even if the GDP were not manipulated, Indian GDP per capita is only $2,500 per capita. So this is not really a very significant GDP. This basically allows these people to live hand to mouth. Not even hand to mouth. About 70 to 80% of the Indian population goes to bed hungry. That is how bad the situation is. Now, look at the GDP. What happens with the ultra rich in that country, or even the rich people in India, is that these are not value creators. Value creators in the sense of Elon Musk or even Bill Gates, these Indian rich people are not value creators. The way Indian business thinking goes is that they want to transfer money from your wallet to their wallets. And business is just a facade to make that transfer happen. Now, if any value is created, that is incidental to that transfer of cash. But these are crooked people. So the rich people in India are mostly made up of, or actually, all of them are made up of people who have political connections and who are crooked. Now, if you remove the top 10% of Indian rich people from GDP calculation, the per capita GDP falls to just over $1,000 for an Indian. And that tells you how utterly backward and wretched that country is. Most people, and I would say about 80% of the people, haven't seen any increase in their salaries in the last 10 years in nominal terms, which means that in real terms, their salaries and wages have fallen by about 50%. Today, I can hire a daily wage worker without any promise for employment tomorrow, just on a daily basis. I can hire him for about $4 American a day. That is how, or I have recently been told that in smaller places, I'm only talking about a city of 2 million where I come from, that is where you can get someone for $4. In rural places, you can get people for about just over $1 per day. So that's how wretched and backward that country is. For my guess is, Gabriel, that for 80 to 90% of the Indian population, life and quality of life hasn't improved at all in the last 30 years or probably in the last 100 years. They are still wretched, they still go to bed hungry, they have cell phones, but those cell phones are and does not provide food to their bellies.
Second level question on this topic. We have this concept called manufacturing value added. And basically, you can think about this as okay, you have raw materials, you put them into manufacturing. How much more value does this product have after you've manufactured it compared to the raw materials? Why is that a useful way of maybe measuring things? And as regards India, how much has this Indian manufacturing value added increased in the last several decades?
In the last 60 to 70 years, Indian manufacturing as a part of its overall GDP has continued to decline. Now, I know, given what you hear about India in the media, it's hard to believe. All you have to do is to go to the World Bank's website and look at manufacturing as a part of Indian GDP, and you will see that it has continued to decline for the last 60, 70 years, which is all that they have data for. And it currently stands at about 13 or 12% of the GDP. That's how little manufacturing that India does. Now, what media will tell you is that India might have manufactured iPhones worth, let's say, $50 billion. Now, they will not tell you that India might have imported virtually most of that from other countries. They might have put a couple of screws on that iPhone, and the value added might have been a few cents for each iPhone. I don't know the exact number, Gabriel, but the value added is the key to what manufacturing is. Revenue is not the key. Most of manufacturing that India claims to do is actually assembling, which means that they get virtually everything and they finally put things together. Even then, Indian manufacture, these assembled products have massive problems. This is the issue that Apple faces. And Gabriel, for over the last 1 week or so, since the time Donald Trump imposed tariffs on China, massive tariffs on China, a lot of people have approached me asking me if India would be a beneficiary of this. Would this mean that a lot of manufacturing would finally move from China to India? And my response invariably is no, it isn't going to happen, because eventually company know that they would rather pay 100% or 200% extra import duty than get things manufactured in India because Indians are unskilled. What runs that society is corruption and connections. It's a zero trust society. It's a society which does not have the concept of values. It does not have the concept of 10 commandments. It's an amoral, irrational society. So you really cannot train these people to work in modern manufacturing. So my response to all those people is that India missed every single train in the past. It will again miss the train today. And India's potential to do better is the same as that of lead to become gold, which means that it is actually impossible for India to be a better place. In fact, India will continue to degrade despite the opportunities that it stands in front of because of the massive tariffs that America has imposed on China.
You're really good at painting a picture of India that most people they're never going to see, they're never going to understand. I wonder if you could paint a picture of what India was like during COVID.
I was in India. I was actually on a consulting assignment with a multi-billion-dollar North American company in India, and I got stuck during COVID because overnight, Modi stopped all flights, all train services, all bus services, and it was a complete chaos in that country. People who were earning a couple of dollars a day living in New Delhi could no longer afford to buy food, let alone be able to pay rents for the accommodations in the slums that they had. So, all these literally tens of millions of people, probably about 100 to 200 million migrant workers, had to return back to their rural places. They had no bus services available, no trains, no flights. Of course, they could not afford flights anyway. So these people walked 1,000 or 2,000 kilometers barefoot because they can't really afford footwear in 40, 45, 50 degrees centigrade. Thousands of these people died on the road. Women were raped. Women gave birth on the roadsides. And in the meantime, wherever police saw them, they beat these people to pulp. So it was an obnoxious experience watching what Modi was doing. The police was beating up these people all the time. I actually started posting under the headline of India's Hungry Games on Twitter. So you can search as India's Hungry Games and you will come across literally hundreds of my posts talking about what India was going through during that time. It was a brutal lockdown in that country where people were humiliated. And in fact, pregnant women going to the hospital were beaten up. Sick people could not find taxis because no one they couldn't really get anything to get to the hospital. The roads were all blocked to the hospitals. So it was a pathetic situation. And I calculated just because of how many people I knew died because of the lockdown as a proportion to the total number of people I knew in the country. And I calculated based on that maybe about 4 to 5 million Indians died during the COVID lockdown. And later on, international media published a similar figure. So yes, Modi is responsible for killing as many people as Hitler was responsible for killing in Germany, just during COVID lockdown.
And so check the link in the show notes for a link to his India's Hunger Games that he was posting about on Twitter. I wanted to also ask you, Jayant, about the H-1B visa situation. Now, you know this better than most, that there's some shenanigans happening, obviously. What is the H-1B visa industrial complex like in India, where you have a very complex web of people who are involved in basically, in some cases, getting fake visas. What is that whole situation like? Because I know that's something you've been investigating recently.
Well, it's not complex at all, Gabriel. There are at least 3 or 4 buildings in my city of 2 million people where, if you go, you will see hundreds of advertisements and boards mentioning about helping you get to the US, Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. They will do everything for you. They will cook up, they will make fake educational qualifications for you, they will make fake degrees for you. They will make work experiences for you. They will do absolutely everything for you. And because a lot of these immigration visas are based on point systems, the bureaucrat has no choice but to give you H1B or other immigrant visas. Now, this is rampant. I have talked with a lot of people, and they all say they make fake documents. Now, there is no way, Gabriel, that the bureaucrats in the American, Canadian, Australian, or New Zealand embassy do not know about it. They live in India, they employ a lot of Indians, they know what is happening. But they are too politically correct, and too politically correct in the sense that they don't want to lose their 150,000 per year dollar salary to do what is good for their countries. So these are bureaucrats who are selfish, who are unethical, who are operating these embassies. But virtually everything about H1B and immigrant visa applications can be faked. And that is why I actually prefer illegal migrants more than illegal migrants, because at least the illegal migrants have the entrepreneurialism to figure out a way to get to the US, which also, in a way, in my way of saying that this legal migration is suicidal for the West.
I wanted to also start using our conversations to also target particular parts of India and maybe get your thoughts on them, basically helping us to understand particular parts of India. I thought we could start off with Manipur and basically ask you what the heck is going on in Manipur.
For the last many years, there has been a conflict between tribes in that part of the world, in Manipur, but not only in Manipur. That northeastern part of India has been very disturbed socially because of the tribal warfare that happens. And now superimposed by Hindutva, this politically motivated Hindu ideology where mosques have to be converted into temples, or where Christianity has to be ridiculed, or Christians have to be found out and converted back into Hinduism. Now, whatever that conversion might mean, because Hinduism itself is a English construct, there was nothing like Hinduism until about 150 years back. So Manipur has been having this conflicts of tribal forces, particularly on one side being the governing party, the BJP, which is a Hindu fanatic party. These are made up of demagogues who don't even actually believe in Hinduism. They are there for power and money. And I have known these people very closely, Gabriel. My dad ran one of the top printing presses in central India, and we mostly catered to the what is now known as the BJP. The people who came to our printing press, their sons and daughters are now in the ministries of the country. I knew those people, and I know what low lives those people are. They are brain dead, they are junkies, they are demagogues, they don't care about anyone, they don't even care about their own families. They care about money and power. That's the only thing they care about. They're mentally and physically sick.
How are women in Manipur reacting to some of the rape that's going on over there?
Well, there's something called Indian Armed Forces Act, which basically condones any rape done by the Indian Armed Forces. And this has been happening for decades now, that the government, the police, and the armed forces have a free hand on raping people in Kashmir and in people in northeastern part of India. But Gabriel, this is something that is easy to say, but this happens all over the country. I was a witness to a sexual exploitation of a boy who was not even a teenager just 3 years back. And I went all the way to the chief minister of my state because I was a witness. No one cares. This happens regularly. If you are a poor girl or if you are a young boy, you will get raped by the police, irrespective of which police station you go to. In fact, I suggest to any visitor going to India to just randomly walk into a police station in India and see what he experiences. You will see brutalities happening in that police station. So that's how ugly the whole system is. It is not just against women in Manipur. This is what happens across the country, except that Hindus today want to think that somehow by going against Muslims or Christians, they are improving their lives. The reality is that Muslims and Sikhs are capable of have a better community situation, so they can gang up against the police. So the police actually mostly goes after Hindu women and Hindu boys, mostly from the lower caste. So this happens all the time, all over the country. But what you would see headlines coming out of would be from northeastern part of the country and Kashmir.
I also heard that some women were calling for other women to get raped in all of this.
Yes, and Gabriel, that is why I consistently remind people that do not for a second assume that the weaker party is any more innocent than the stronger party. In fact, in absolutely every way, those who are oppressed, when they get into positions of power, they are more cunning, more exploitative in the government, in the society, absolutely everywhere I have seen. The lower caste people, when they get into positions of power, become more corrupt than higher caste people were. They become more exploitative. And Indian women are no innocent. They will do absolutely everything that the men would if they had penises, or they actually figuratively use their penises when they become powerful. So yes, they will call for men of their own community to rape women of the opposing community when the time comes. So anyone who wants to take the side of the lower caste or the weak people or women is, I would say, cuckish in a sense that he is not trying to understand that the weak side is mostly weak because it is also spiritually weak.
In a previous conversation, we were talking about the Bhopal incident, and you mentioned you brought up a term called pleasure centers. I'm not quite sure what that means.
So, Gabriel, we are all animals at the end of the day. We have these animalistic instincts. We are wired for survival, procreation, and if we are not civilized, we have this very strong instincts for gluttony and sexual behavior, promiscuity. So those people who grow up in societies structured around 10 commandments think that civilizations occur in nature. That is actually not true at all. You require reason and morality, which are human constructs to make a civilized society. Now, if you don't have those constraints, those fences created internally or externally, your society becomes hedonistic, and then eventually that hedonism converts into savagery and barbarianism. And the reason that happens is that animalistic instincts do not lead to ultimate satisfaction. So you look for new and new perversions to satisfy your sexual and instincts for pleasures. So you become more and more savage with time.
And so a pleasure center is...
All right. So the pleasure center you mentioned was an office of Union Carbide that existed in Bhopal, the city I grew up in, where senior bureaucrats and politicians were entertained. Girls were brought in to entertain these senior officers. This was a well-known place, and this of course catered to the sexual aspect of dealing with the bureaucrats and politicians. This continues. This happens all over the country. The people in positions of rule are exploitative, and they don't really care what they do with young girls and young boys. And now this has become more institutionalized as time has gone by. Union Carbide those days was the only company that probably had a pleasure center for bureaucrats. Today, those girls are supplied to your homes.
Just a little bit of a different topic here. I recently picked up I consider it a fabulous book on India. It's Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things. Just curious if you're familiar with it.
I am very familiar with her. She is a leftist, and I admire her. Now, this might sound strange to a Western audience because I'm a conservative anarcho-capitalist, and why do I like a leftist, an ultra-leftist philosopher of India? The reason, Gabriel, is that if you grow up in India, the only hope that you would have to become intellectually independent would be to become a leftist. Because as I explained to you earlier, what the people who live a crony lifestyle are the people who call themselves capitalist. So within the ecosystem of India, capitalism looks so corrupt that the height of moral values that you see growing up in that country is to be a leftist. Uh, Arundhati Roy addresses everything the right way. I admire her. I think she analyzes and dissects the problems of the country the right way. But unfortunately, because she is a leftist, she ends up wanting to crave for more government control over lives of businessmen and more government control over lives of people, not really thinking through this properly, that it is the government which makes things even worse. But apart from that, I completely agree with her dissection of how the businessmen are in bed with politicians and bureaucrats to exploit the poor people of that country.
And I'd encourage the listeners, go find a copy of her famous novel, The God of Small Things. Excellent, excellent book, excellent, heartwarming, disturbing portrayal of India, and a book that I've recently returned to, and it's just as good as I remember. Another scenario, Jayant, where you can help people to understand something that most of them will never experience. And I wonder if you could, in as much detail as you can, just paint a picture, a simple experience somebody might have traveling to the airport in Mumbai from the outskirts. What would that look like from the ground level?
Well, firstly, you have to plan to leave your place about 2 to 3 hours or even earlier from your place. If you are in the outskirts of Mumbai, probably I would say 5 hours, because traffic can be horrible in Mumbai. You will book an Uber, and Uber works everywhere in the world except in India. The moment you book an Uber, the driver will call you back asking you to tell him where you want to go. The reason is that Uber does not tell the taxi driver, the app guy, where you want to go. So he will ask you about it, and if he does not like the destination, he will cancel the visit, or he will actually ask you to cancel it, because that way you pay the penalty. This is consistently the process. Every single time you book a ride app, use the ride app, 5 seconds later, the driver will call you to figure out where you want to go. So nothing works in that country. So firstly, you are never sure whether you will get a car to get to the airport or not. Now, when you go to the airport, the taxi drivers is not unlikely to fight with you for no good reason. He's not going to make any extra money. He's just going to take out his stored up anger on you for no good reason. He will abuse people while he is driving. He will shout at people. He will jump red lights, and he will go on the wrong side of the road. When you arrive at the airport in Mumbai, he will take you to a place where uniformed people will offer their services to take your bags. They will offer to wrap your bags and take them uh, to the airport. Now these are run by the mafia, and the cut from the money that these people get reaches all the way to the top authorities in the airport, including to the security agencies. Once you are outside the airport, you have to show your boarding pass and ID card to the security official at the gate, which means that outside the airport, there is usually a long and difficult lineup. And Indians don't line up, so it's a blob of people trying to show to enter the airport. Now, during COVID times, of course, there was a massive blob of people, and I traveled a few times during COVID times. But of course, government people think that COVID infection spreads only when they are not creating chaos themselves. So you show your ID. It takes quite a while. It can take you half an hour to get through this first pass. And then you get to the airport counter, you check in. But after check in to entering your gate, you will be checked maybe 5, 6, or 7 times for your boarding pass and ID card. When you do the security, it's the same blob of chaos. There is no system of lining up, and you have to take out every single cable from your bag before you do the X-rays. So this is a very chaotic situation. It never improves. And I would say it's getting worse by the time.
You mentioned on another show that you had at one point installed an operating system that was an Indian operating system, and that it immediately began to spam you with ads. I wonder if you recall that event. And
this was not an operating system, Gabriel. This was an accounting software that was a product of Tata Consulting Services that I installed on my computer. And that tax accounting software took over the operating system in a way that advertisements were popping up on my monitor all over the place, all the time, even when I was not running the accounting software. And that is when I promised myself that I would never buy a software made in India. Even if I had to buy a software made by Tata Consulting Services, I would still buy an American product because they could not harass me the way they did with this software. So that's what I did thereafter. And that is why I don't want to buy any software in India.
Moving away from India to more general topics, I thought I'd ask you a few questions on economics. We mentioned in a previous discussion the BRICS countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and we were pretty skeptical about them. Now, it seems that China and India are starting to cooperate in some way. Russia and China, I saw recently, are now trying to settle some transactions in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Things don't seem to be as bleak as you forecast in our previous interview. Your thoughts?
Well, I disagree with that. I think India is on its way out of BRICS right now. The US told these countries that if they tried not using American dollar, America would apply 100% tariff on them. India gave in right away. As I said, they have no spine, they have no value structure, no moral values, and no concept of honor. So India gave in right away that they would not think about using any BRICS currency. And today, as it stands, India, it seems, might be thrown out of BRICS. It does not fit in because India has no value system. It does not work for the good of any group. It works for the benefit of the rulers. It does not even work for the benefit of Indians. It only works for the benefit of people in power. So BRICS in India is a non-entity. It's a dysfunctional entity, and it corrupts everything that it belongs to.
Question about tariffs. There's tariff chaos going on in the world right now, and it has people asking, especially people who have libertarian sentiments, free trade sentiments, such as you and I, Jayant, is there any value to tariffs? Now, I think, for example, so I just want to ask you generally on how you view tariffs. It is one of these situations where you have first world countries engaging with second and third world countries. So that does it is relevant to the other things we've discussed. And also maybe as a model, I'm aware that Switzerland typically has tariffs, and so they end up just making a ton of their own stuff, and it's one of the highest functioning societies in the world, if not the most. What are your thoughts on tariffs?
Well, I am very pro Trump and I continue to be very pro Trump, Gabriel. In my view, these tariffs are a desperate attempt to bring manufacturing back to the US. Now, here is the problem. The best way to bring back manufacturing to the US would be to end the welfare system. If you ended the welfare system, the top 30% of the population of the US, which does not want to work because it gets more money in welfare, would be forced to enter low value added manufacturing, which would actually bring in exactly the kind of manufacturing that Trump wants returned to the US. But unfortunately, ending the welfare system is virtually impossible. Once you institutionalize the welfare system, it is not possible to end it. So he has chosen to blame it all on China and apply a massive tariff to isolate China. I understand his motivations, and I think in his seat, I would probably have done something similar. But at the same time, the kind of tariffs he has applied are humongous. Most companies operate on 5 or 10% profit margins. Now, if you increase the price of those products by 100% or 50%, those products become unviable for the companies that manufacture them. Which means that it is very hard this is going to be a very hard time for manufacturing people around the world, including those in the US, because a lot of parts that go into final products of American companies come from overseas. I have a very difficult time getting my head around it. I think he should have increased these tariffs slowly, but more than that, he should have addressed the lobbies in Washington, which destroy the economic structure of the US. He should have reduced the welfare state. He should have reduced the regulations. And those things should have brought back manufacturing more rationally to the United States. And I don't even think manufacturing is necessarily returning back to the US anyway, Gabriel. For an operating plant to move manufacturing from China to the US would take maybe 4, 5, 6 years. Everyone knows that Trump is in power only for the next 2 years effectively, because he will start having to think about the next elections after 1 or 2 years. So, given that situation, a manufacturing plant isn't going to necessarily move its manufacturing to the US, knowing fully well that Democrats might be back into power 3 years from now, but also because of the demographic shifts happening in the US will have to soften up its stand over the next few years.
That was economics. Let's do a little bit, a quick tour of the world here. And I wanted to start by presenting this to you. I'm looking here at the inflation rates of countries. This is by the World Bank, and this is the Wikipedia article list of countries by inflation rate. And the top ones, we have all third world countries. We have Lebanon, Turkey, Sierra Leone, Iran, Ghana, Haiti, Egypt, Laos, Pakistan. And I have a feeling, Jayant, if we were to look at just the grand scheme of things, we would probably notice that inflation is much more a product of the third world than the first world. Just your thoughts on whether or not you agree with that.
Absolutely, because poor people can be fooled more easily. The low IQ people can be fooled more easily with inflation than through taxes. And when you tax people, if you are in a dysfunctional society, companies avoid paying taxes anyway. So inflation is one of the easier ways for these demagogues to extract money from the society. In fact, because a lot of these politicians in power and bureaucrats are brain dead anyway in the third world, and I would say even in the first world, means that they don't really understand what printing money means to the economy. So they print at abandon. And you can see that in Turkey, actually, one of the best cases, Turkey, they not only print a lot of money, they also manage the foreign currency regime in that country. And I was in Turkey a few months back. And I tell you, you would pay more for a coffee in Istanbul than you would in San Francisco. That's how expensive it could be in Turkey. And you get a much lower quality of everything. But that is what happens with these third world countries.
Listener discretion advised on, especially on this question. Jayant, what exactly is Bacha bazi?
Oh, bacha bazi. Bacha bazi is sodomizing children. That is quite common in the third world countries. These are the third world countries that are amoral and irrational. And I talked with you about hedonism and the problem with pleasure centeredness. And the problem is that you ramp up the ways you want to satisfy yourself, because pleasures can never be satisfied. And that is why free run to hedonism will lead to perversions. And you are then easily looking for children, young boys, to sodomize them. And that is called bacha baji. Bacha is child, and baji is playing with a child. And because of the religious and social restrictions in the Muslim world, parts of the Muslim world, some of the Muslim countries are great. But in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in India, in Bangladesh, young boys are very vulnerable because not only they get sodomized, if they go to the police to report any matters, police will sodomize them anyway, but police will laugh it off and the society will laugh it off. In fact, Gabriel, if you look at my Twitter postings, you will see Indians making comments about me that, hey, Jayant was sodomized when he was a child. And they think that this is a matter of to laugh at. So that's how wretched their thinking is. And that means that these kind of things keep happening in the society because people know that there's no protection available to them either from the police or from the society, because they will either laugh it off or they will actually sodomize you. This is quite common.
In third world armies, how common are things like friendly fire, for example?
So if you look back at the Iran-Iraq war that happened 30 years back or so, 30 years back, most of the deaths were from friendly fire, which means that Iranians were killing their own people and Iraqis were killing their own people. Because those armies were structured and institutionalized by European colonizers, and the local people cannot run those vast institutions the way they were supposed to be run. The same happens in India. Most of the people that Indian army kills are people of the Indian army. Aside from Indian citizens, Indian army has killed more Indian citizens than many times more Indian citizens than all the aliens put together. Similarly, recently, less than a decade back, there was a strike that India made into Pakistan. They managed to shoot a missile on a tree. So they killed a tree. But in the meantime, the plane never returned back to India. Pakistan shot it down because it was using Chinese communication systems. And in the meantime, Indian army shot down an Indian helicopter, which had something like 20 to 26 armed people in the helicopter. So they killed a far more people of their own kind, and they killed only a tree of Pakistan. This is what friendly fire means in that country. Thankfully, India is dysfunctional, so is Pakistan, and so is Bangladesh. And that is why there is always a status quo. But when there was a war between India and China was able to walk all over India in 1962.
We discussed in a previous conversation about honor, and one characteristic of honor is that you have righteous indignation when you feel that somebody is oppressing you. If we look at somewhere like Latin America, known for its culture of resistance, much more perhaps even than the West, surely that hints at some kind of level of honor culture or self awareness. What are your thoughts on that?
Latin America is self aware only to the extent that it has a proportion of its population that came from West Europe. But apart from that, the Native Americans, unfortunately, do not have the honor culture, in my view. What might come across as honor culture is actually ego culture. And that is why my suggestion, Gabriel, is that the term honor killing should be rephrased as ego killing. Whenever I look at anything that looks like an honor killing or honor system in the third world, if I dissect those, I realize that they have nothing to do with honor. They have everything to do with egos.
The Rohingya genocide that is currently going on. What do you know about that, and what is your assessment of it?
I have been to that area, Gabriel. That was a long time back. Conflicts are an inherent part of the third world countries. These are tribal people. They always look for someone to fight with. These are the people who are incapable of living in harmony and incapable of loving anyone. Now, remember, love and harmony only comes to people who have virtues and who have something like 10 commandments. So, love and harmony can exist only in Far East Asia or among European people. Hatred is what runs people of the third world. So they are always looking for another tribe to hate. And that is mostly because they hate the people of their own kind the most. So if you look at the tribal conflicts in the third world, you will realize that most of the conflict is within their tribes. And they look for an escape by hating an outsider so that that hate brings them together. This is what you see in the Khalistan movement. This is what you see among Hindus and Muslims. They are all atomized people, and this is what you see in Myanmar. Myanmar has literally hundreds of tribes, and they are all fighting with each other. Anti-Muslim thinking is just one of the aspects which gets highlighted in the international media just because it's easier for the Western people to digest. But the fact remains that these tribal conflicts are ever present everywhere in the third world countries.
6,700 killed in the first months of the attack. We have human rights violations, extrajudicial killings, summary executions, gang rape, arson, infanticide, sexual violence against 18,000 Rohingya women and girls. 116,000 Rohingya were beaten. 36,000 were thrown into fires.
These people are vicious. These people are absolutely vicious. Gabriel, and that's why I left the third world. This goes around all over the third world countries. I was in Goma in DRC, and I witnessed so many people who were physically damaged, and the police, the European police that were in my hotel, told me that when Congolese men rape, they don't just rape, they actually put in metal objects into the vaginas of women and mutilate these women. So there are a lot of cosmetic surgery centers funded by European organizations to help out those women. These people are vicious. And as I said, when you let hedonism run rampant, it leads to extreme perversions, extreme craziness that most of us are incapable of thinking. I have witnessed those, and I tell you that what you just mentioned about Myanmar happens all over the third world countries. It happened in Sri Lanka, it happened in Pakistan. literally hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshi women, Muslim women, were raped by Muslim army men of what was East Pakistan. So this is nothing unusual. Indian armies have raped people in Kashmir and northeastern provinces. And I told you about a recent case I saw myself in what was the most high profile police area of the country, of central India. So just because those things are not headline news does not mean it does not happen elsewhere. It happens all over those places. And I remember another incident, Gabriel. I went to a mining site in Madhya Pradesh. Now, again, this is my state, the province I grew up in. The people in villages live in utter fear of the security agencies. These security officers and soldiers who come from the lower caste with impunity use the local women for whatever they want. And if they come at 2 o'clock in the night and if they want food cooked, they will knock at the doors of these homes and ask them to cook food for them. So there's no rule of law in these countries. And the best rule of law in the third world countries is actually a Taliban kind of rule of law. So I think, in my view, Afghanistan is ahead of India and Myanmar.
A few rapid fire questions here, if you're up for it, Jayant.
Absolutely.
What's the quickest you can get a PhD in India?
Pay a bribe.
Does romantic love exist outside the West?
In East Asia.
How much more does India import than export?
India imports 50%, let's say more, 50% more than what it exports.
August 23rd, 2023, India lands on the moon. Do you think that actually happened?
I doubt it. They haven't provided us a proper video of that.
Which is worse, communism, fascism, or democracy?
Democracy.
How does India rank for press freedom of the press?
Lower than Afghanistan, from what I know.
How long does it take to get a legitimate driver's license in India?
No time. Home service available for about $20, bribe included.
The third world population is quite large. If we think about the entire third world population, how big do you think it would have been if there was never any colonization of the third world?
I would say 5% of the current populations, and eventually they will all fall to 5% of the current populations.
Which country would you rather live in, the United States or China as of today?
As of today, the US, but if I think in terms of the next 10 years, China.
As we get to the end here, really grateful for your time, Mr. Bhandari. And previously we mentioned your book that you're working on. If you could, maybe you have an update on that. You have a conference that you run. Please tell people where they can find you.
I think, halfway through my book, Gabriel. I hope I should have it published sometime this year. I run a philosophy seminar in Vancouver every year in Canada. The next one will be on the 23rd of August in downtown Vancouver. And I invite about 10 to 15 speakers for a 1.5 day conference in which we talk about various topics, all related with free speech and mostly related with topics that we usually cannot talk about in other forums.
And so please check out Mr. Bhandari at jayantbhandari.com. Thank you again, Jayant.
Thanks very much, Gabriel, for the opportunity.
Hey, thanks for listening. Look, I could use your help real quick. If you could share this, engage with me in some way, leave a review anywhere. This really helps me to break the technocratic shadow banning that is happening with my brand. And of course, if you really want to escape the technocracy, go to escapethetechnocracy.com. Privacy tutorial series, books, consulting, and of course you can leave a donation. Thank you very much.